Can ChatGPT write a better sequel than two of the most revered sci-fi writers of a generation? Let's find out. The Matrix Reloaded was the most anticipated movie of my childhood, and unfortunately also one of the most disappointing. Some of the action sequences still hold up, and I admire the density of ideas packed into the film, but as has been expressed countless times on the internet in levels of detail that I'm not going to recount, it fell short. But what if, in a delicious irony, the Wachowskis could turn to a machine to help them write the sequel to The Matrix? I asked ChatGPT-4 to pitch me the second installment in the Matrix franchise, assuming the sequels had never been made, and while maintaining the intellectual spirit of the trilogy. So, this was my prompt. Write me a pitch for a sequel to the original Matrix film, assuming the sequels were never made. Let's be sure to implement the following themes: critique of power structures, free will versus determinism, how liberation narratives can be co-opted as another form of control, and postmodern blurring of real and unreal. Let's also make sure there are awesome action sequences and that the themes are baked organically into the plot. And here's ChatGPT-4's pitch. I give you The Matrix Chains of Liberation. Act 1. Neo and Trinity orchestrate a daring rescue mission within the Matrix to liberate more minds. However, their actions inadvertently trigger an adaptive algorithm, creating an advanced agent, Echo. Echo, a mirror of Neo, suggests the unsettling idea that their liberation missions might be an expected outcome, another layer of control within the Matrix. Meanwhile, in the real world, Morpheus faces a power struggle in Zion. A new leadership faction believes in aggressive expansion and dispatching more teams into the Matrix, even at the cost of safety. Despite his status as a founder, Morpheus is sidelined, indicating that power dynamics persist even in a supposed utopia. Act 2. Echo, the new agent, challenges Neo with scenarios where those freed from the Matrix cause chaos, both within the system and in Zion. They're not ready to handle the harsh reality outside, leading to destruction and loss. This gives birth to exhilarating action sequences while further questioning the narratives of liberation. In the real world, the new aggressive strategies adopted by the new leadership in Zion lead to disastrous encounters with the machines, causing casualties. This compels Morpheus to challenge the new power hierarchy, fighting not just for leadership, but for Zion's ethos of freedom. Act 3. Within the Matrix, Neo must outmaneuver Echo in a race against time to stop a massive liberation operation that could potentially harm more people than it helps. This leads to an epic showdown where Neo not just fights Echo, but also tries to defuse a situation where people's realities are being altered against their will. Simultaneously, Morpheus takes a stand against the new leaders of Zion, igniting a civil dispute. This struggle culminates in a climactic real-world action sequence paralleling Neo's fight in the Matrix. In the end, Neo manages to halt the operation, suggesting that freedom is meaningless if forced. Morpheus regains his influence in Zion, emphasizing that power should never be absolute, even in the pursuit of freedom. For an AI in its infancy, this is not bad. Yeah, the title is clumsy, but there's some real merit to what ChatGPT put forward here. That being said, there are also some subtleties lost, so let's break it down. First of all, ChatGPT weaved together two main plots characterized by the same theme, power and control. While Neo and Trinity are fighting to undermine machine supremacy in the Matrix, Morpheus is struggling with his own power struggles against the leaders of Zion. Already a sign of solid structuring and implementation of theme. Also, unlike The Matrix Reloaded, things aren't frustratingly convoluted here. Reloaded notoriously introduced so many new characters and factions, whereas in the original film, the antagonistic forces are pretty contained to a single entity, Smith, give or take his posse. ChatGPT wisely follows suit with the adaptive algorithm Echo, a formidable foe who serves as both physical threat and dispenser of information that propels the protagonist's journey of discovery forward. So, focusing on just one villain is a step in the right direction. Introducing Echo as a mirror of Neo is also quite clever, as the first film ended in what I like to call the One-Punch Man dilemma. How do you create meaningful conflict if your protagonist is OP? It takes nearly an hour into The Matrix Reloaded before we get a hint that Neo may have met his match with Smith, whereas in this version, Echo poses a threat within the first 15 to 30 minutes, and there we also have a sign of competent screenwriting. When it comes to the antagonist's motivations, maybe the AI stumbled a bit trying trying to juggle advancing the plot of an action movie with integrating the themes I listed. If Echo tells Neo that liberating people within the Matrix works in favor of the powers that be, then why does he tell him at all? Also, if the third act is Echo attempting to execute a large-scale liberation operation, again, why doesn't he just leave Neo to do it? Having said that, it's not like the Wachowskis' version made perfect sense either. Reloaded makes the exact same error. If the Keymaker must guide Neo to the Architect to keep the Matrix from crashing, why are the agents chasing him on the freeway? Also, I have to assume that Echo's master plan is that liberation will lead to so much chaos that it either entirely destabilizes the resistance or drives more people into the arms of the status quo. One thing I like about this is that Neo is back to ground zero at the end, because his central purpose of freeing all mankind is no longer an option. The Wachowskis were very much trying to mirror the struggle to revolutionize the system that dominates our lives, capitalism. But as my favorite philosopher Slavoj Žižek opines, we can't even imagine what a real overthrow of the system would look like. As he often says,
that I'm ready to sell my mother into slavery for a film called V for Vendetta Part 2. But what happened the next day? How will they effectively reorganize life?
And I quite like how this pitch makes a similar point, that even though we can identify a system with glaring issues, tearing it to the ground is not the most prudent solution and will very likely cause more harm than good. So I think this pitch ends at a really captivating crossroads. There's a lot of merit to the structure and plot here, but what about the heavy philosophical themes that the series is known for? Did the AI gracefully implement them? In my opinion, this is more of a mixed bag. On the one hand, the AI was able to implement the notion that liberation narratives can be co-opted by those in power with significantly more simplicity than the actual film. In Reloaded, we get the often parodied, cryptic explanation from the architect.
No? What about contingent affirmation? That's gotta mean something.
Hey!
That the prophecy of the One is all part of the machine's master plan, that in order for the anomaly, of which Neo is the sixth, to be integrated into the code and prevent systemic collapse at the hands of Smith, Neo has to enter the source and then repopulate a diminished Zion. Neo chooses not to do this because it would mean letting Trinity die, yada yada yada.
Yada yada yada.
Whereas in ChatGPT's scenario, Echo tells Neo that the increase of free minds created by the myth of the One leads to chaos and instability. Much simpler to explain, and harkens back to Cypher's desire for a comfortable lie instead of the difficult truth.
Ignorance is bliss.
This even overlaps nicely with the widely held notion that rampant disillusionment with traditional authority leads to nihilism and unsustainable chaos. Now, maybe the Wachowskis would deem that a reactionary position, but that's another matter. I also appreciate how the pitch suggests that such chaos enables a consolidation of power in Zion, that the authoritarian impulse is emboldened in the face of disorder. However, I can't help but think that there's something less mind-blowing about this. In ChatGPT's pitch, the problems with Neo's liberation missions are self-evident. It's causing instability, people are losing their minds, and that's bad. But in The Matrix Reloaded, Smith is a subtle indication that something is going wrong, but aside from that, we think that Neo is continuing his divinely ordained path until the very end when he meets the Architect. We're completely invested in the narrative of Neo as the savior of mankind, just like Neo is, and then with him, we get the rug pulled out from under us as we learn that the Chosen One narrative is all part of the plan.
Because it's all part of the plan.
Also, the Wachowskis were able to more faithfully depict co-optation than the AI. It's perhaps a subtle distinction here. In ChatGPT's version, the Liberator unwittingly plays into the hands of the oppressor, and in the real film, the Liberator learns that he's nothing more than a variable that's not only accounted for, but depended on in order for the system to perpetuate itself. In the ChatGPT version, there are unintended negative consequences to fulfilling the prophecy that the machines have planned for, but in The Matrix Reloaded, the prophecy itself is the means of control, which also has greater ramifications for Neo's reflections on the freedom of his actions.
The One was never meant to end anything.
It was all another system of control.
The AI's implementation of a critique of power structures is a similarly mixed bag. On one hand, I quite like how in Morpheus's plot we see that oppressive power is not only something that machines can wield against humans, but that humans can also impose on one another. It's also a nice contrast to the schmaltzy, everything earthy and organic is good rave scene that nobody liked. However, again, I think the lesson of The Matrix Reloaded is much more subtle and insightful than the ChatGPT version. Problem is, you can only glean this point if you were awake during the conversations Neo has with Counselor Hammond regarding control,
What is control?
the Merovingian regarding causality,
Causality. There is no escape from it.
and finally the Architect regarding choice.
The problem is choice.
Basically, Neo learns that control isn't as simple as individual agents making decisions to oppress people. Power is much more diffuse than that. Agency is compromised by our understanding of language, by technology, and the arrangement of our social and material conditions. We're not really free to turn off the machines that create our air and water. We're always merely reacting to the things that happen to us, and choice is more illusory than we'd like to think. This all culminates in Neo learning that the Matrix isn't a system in the sense that it's a computer program with its own rules and dictates. The Matrix is the broader, self-sustaining cycle that includes the simulation known as the Matrix, but also its inevitable destabilization when the One emerges, the destruction of Zion as a means of population control, and the integration of the One into the source so that the program doesn't crash. This is the system of control, not just individual powerful people making decisions like in ChatGPT's Zion, but how the arrangement of centers of power interact to determine our lives. Although ChatGPT's critique of power structures is a far cry from the sophistication of the Wachowskis, it's worth questioning if such a critique can be saliently communicated to an audience without boring them to death. But regardless, here, I think the AI is losing something. Regarding the postmodern blurring of real and unreal, this is a tricky one. In the Real trilogy, we see this in the end of Reloaded when Neo is able to use his powers in the real world, then in the third one when he traverses a space between the real world and the Matrix, and then there's the Gold world. None of this is really explainable, although God knows many a Matrix nerd has tried. Overall, I think the AI adapted this theme quite cleverly. Here, Neo moves from a position of needing to expose everyone to a more material truth of reality to being forced to accept a more relativist notion. He learns that forcing people to adopt a certain understanding of reality, whether or not it's more true, isn't in line with at least a certain understanding of freedom. Now, whether or not you agree, this emphasis on subjectivity is often associated with postmodernism, so the AI didn't get the prompt wrong. And there's definitely an argument to be made that this is a more thoughtful interrogation of the shifting line between real and unreal than just positing planes of reality that evade a definitive explanation. The one theme the AI didn't explore as explicitly as in the real film is free will versus determinism. I quite liked how Agent Smith was able to actually exist as an agent with freedom by his ability to choose to deny his programming. He has an about face later on when he comes to believe that even his rebellion happened for a reason and that he can't escape the motivations for his actions. He then spends the rest of the series trying to convince Neo that he is no different, that he cannot escape the chain of causality. The conversation with the Oracle in which she tells Neo that he's already made all his choices, or when the Architect tells him he's already made the choice to save Trinity and risk the annihilation of Zion, were definitely more explicit, if unnecessary, explorations of this theme. It's just a short pitch that we're dealing with after all here, so maybe the AI baked the free will theme into Neo's co-optation by Echo and the machines. So yeah, if you're questioning AI's potential to inform Hollywood's creative processes, I think the fact that I spent this much time analyzing an AI's first iteration on a movie pitch says a lot, and the technology will only get exponentially better from here. In some respects, a fleshed out version of this pitch has the potential to be as enjoyable, if not more so, than The Matrix Reloaded. It seems that AI is really good at structure and seamlessly implementing multiple priorities into a story that moves. In my opinion, that's what makes it the greatest threat to writers. It's good at the things that writers generally struggle with, like being overly precious about certain ideas at the expense of watchability. So yes, the writers currently striking in Hollywood have every right to be concerned. But I want to caution us against assuming that this is either great because it will create more enjoyable art, or horrible because it will render writers obsolete. I think the truth lies somewhere in between. In some cases, AI writing is appropriate. For example, consider the Super Mario Bros. Movie, which I found to be an enjoyable time at the movies. But I can easily imagine this script having been written by ChatGPT. The prompt would be something like, write a Mario movie with simple character arcs that implements references to the 3D era games as often as possible. And the AI would pump out something similar to what we got in some ways. And this isn't necessarily a bad thing. The Mario movie is a 90-minute feast of eye candy and nostalgia triggers, and for what it is, it's good. But in my last video, I compared it to its predecessor starring Bob Hoskins and John Leguizamo, and I called it a gloriously misguided attempt. And I think that's what a reliance on AI threatens to annihilate. The beautiful $100 million mistakes that our all too human selves are liable to make. If in the future we find ourselves in a cultural landscape where most media is at least structured by the disciplined hand of AI, we will miss out on all these beautiful errors. I'm reminded of a quote from T.S. Eliot. What happens when a new work of art is created is something that happens simultaneously to all the works of art which preceded it. Basically, when art develops, so does our understanding of past art. The proliferation of competent AI content may lead to a retrospective evaluation of what makes a good movie. For example, The Matrix Reloaded. This movie is 20 years old, and I'm still talking about it. 20 years later, and I'm still analyzing it. I'm still reflecting on the enigmas hidden in its train wreckery. Compared to an enjoyable movie like the Mario movie, The Matrix Reloaded has given me the gift of so many conversations and moments of introspection. This new version created by the AI may give me a more enjoyable viewing experience, but without all the cryptic, boring convolution, will it still invite the same passion for analysis? I don't think so. I recently recommended a coworker watch the movie Tetsuo the Iron Man, which is by all accounts one of the strangest movies ever made, and AI could never reach the heights of derangement required to make this movie. My coworker hated every second of its 77-minute runtime, but he later told me that he loved thinking about it for hours afterwards. And that's what AI threatens to destroy, the beauty of the strange, the incompetent, and the under-considered but overfunded. But I have hope that it will also give birth to an increased desire for these sublime mistakes. I foresee a future where The Matrix Reloaded, The Vampire's Kisses, and The Rooms of the world are the movies that we really keep coming back to, that really echo throughout the ages. Thanks everyone for watching. I quite enjoyed doing this, so let me know if you want me to analyze other ChatGPT pitches like The Dark Knight Rises if Heath Ledger were still alive, or Star Wars Episode 7 if it were made in 1985. Be sure to check me out on Twitch where I'll be playing Final Fantasy XVI soon, and if you appreciate the content and want to support the channel, check out my Ko-fi page by clicking the link below. Appreciate you all for watching, and please take it easy. Peace.